Hello everyone, Ewan from What Culture here, still basking in the glow of the Avengers Endgame honeymoon. And by basking, I mean crying a whole lot because holy crap, this film. Avengers Endgame brings to a close a decade's worth of films, and in doing so has sparked an outpouring of emotion from Marvel fans the world over. At the moment, Joe and Anthony Russo's film stands to be the most successful of all Marvel's offerings to date, and though a nascent backlash appears to be bubbling, it can't detract from Marvel's achievements. For all intents and purposes, Endgame is the ultimate comic book movie. It does for live action what Spider-Verse did for animation, at least in terms of the superhero genre specifically. It may not have opened the door for creatives to attempt new methods of filmmaking, but in conveying the magic of Marvel's comics, Infinity War's follow-up is just as sublime. Oh, and there are literally spoilers for everything in this video, so if you haven't seen Endgame and somehow haven't been spoiled already, go ahead and grab the nearest space stone and skedaddle quick. Assuming everyone here is content with spoilers, let's continue by asking the following question. Is Endgame flawless? Well, not particularly. There are genuine issues with Thor's characterization, but not to the destructive degree some reactions have positive, while Black Widow's fate conforms to a long and frustrating trend of comics sticking women in the fridge. All that said, Endgame is still spectacular. It lives up to the promise that the House of Ideas has championed since the Marvel era of the 60s, and does so in a way that dwarfs its contemporaries. It is, quite simply, the finest live-action comic book movie ever made, and an immense achievement for Marvel, writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, the Russos, and of course their stars. It's the end of an era, but also the beginning of a whole new chapter. To juggle so many responsibilities while providing such a compelling narrative is frankly amazing, and something not to be taken lightly. The dust is still to settle on Endgame, and it's perhaps even possible that, with time, the general perception of the film will change. However, hailing the conclusion to the long-gestating Infinity Saga as its best element cannot be dismissed as the idle effects of recency bias. The response to both Infinity War and Endgame has been emphatic, and though there are still plenty of rewatches to come, there's no overstating what the film has accomplished. Like Infinity War before it, Endgame is only capable of telling the story it does thanks to the contributions of over a decade's worth of cinema. Everything from 2008's Iron Man to 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy has been building to this moment, and it's that element that made the two most recent Avengers films so authentic. In a way, the MCU has almost transcended the very medium it's a part of. The franchise is so expansive and so intricate that it may even share more in common with television than it does film, but the more accurate comparison would be with the very source material that it's based off of. Comic book readers and self-professed super dorks such as yours truly will waste no time in telling moviegoers that the payoff provided in Infinity War and Endgame feels familiar, and it's because Marvel has been pulling stunts like these in the comics for literal decades. There are dozens of years invested into every character, every storyline, and even every moment, and it provokes an emotional connection between the reader and the characters they invest in on the page. Endgame, through the cumulative efforts of phases 1, 2, and 3, conveys that exact same feeling. The likes of Iron Man and Captain America have been around for so long in live action that it genuinely pains us all to wave goodbye, and by the time that moment does eventually come, Endgame's brilliance is best illustrated. Some may decry the film as a convoluted cacophony inaccessible to casual audiences, but to do so would be to miss the point spectacularly. The MCU isn't generic or a sign of a creatively stifled industry. While stale, pale imitations fall to the wayside, our condolences to the Dark Universe, it alone survives and thrives. The series' existence is a testament to its own uniqueness, and Endgame represents the payoff in full. No other cinematic franchise, bar perhaps Star Wars, can boast the same kind of emotional connection the MCU has fostered between its characters and its fans. Endgame can distinguish itself immediately through the fact it capitalizes on that connection alone, but it's the way it goes about it that deserves to be praised too. Nothing in the film feels unearned, cheap, or even schlocky, and to execute the grand conclusion in the way it does intimates its credentials perfectly. At this point, it's probably fair to say that the Russos have presided over the best the MCU has to offer. The Winter Soldier, Civil War, and Infinity War all boasted some of the series' best performances, and managed to raise the bar in each entry. Endgame, by design, is the film that demands the most from its stars though. The aforementioned Captain America sequels and Infinity War were all emotional films, and Civil War in particular deserves praise for the way it marshals the fallout between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. Until Endgame, Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. gave their best performances as Cap and Iron Man respectively in that film, but whereas they're both highlights of a convincing cast in that entry, come the fourth Avengers, they're part of an ensemble all equally on tune. Once again, Evans and Downey Jr. are spectacular as Cap and Iron Man. The former seems almost lost at the beginning, unable to see where the line actually ends and what to fight for. Stark, on the other hand, feels immense guilt for what happened on Titan, and attempts to settle down into family life while battling with an alter ego he can't seem to let go of. Both are immaculate in their final moments, and it's in those sequences that both actors can rest assured that they've conjured two of the most memorable comic book movie performances of all time. It isn't just Stark and Rogers who emerge from Endgame having raised the bar though. Jeremy Renner and Scarlett Johansson secretly give the film's two best performances as Hawkeye and Black Widow respectively. It's a huge shame that the latter's is overshadowed by poorly handled death, the fallout of which is glossed over far too quickly, but Endgame still features Johansson's most subtle turn as Natasha yet. It's clear that Nat feels she owes so much to the Avengers, and it's in those earlier moments when everything is at its most hopeless that she's able to lay down the character's armor and convey just how much the team means to her. Likewise, Renner is finally able to deliver the performance everyone knew he was capable of giving back when he was first cast as Hawkeye. His Barton is grief-stricken, in way over his head and desperate to see his family again. And though it might be easy to mock the character's questionable due, there's a rawness to Renner's performance that bears the echo of the one that earned him an Oscar nom in Catherine Bigelow's The Hurt Locker. On the opposite end of the scale, at least in terms of tone, are Mark Ruffalo and Paul Rudd. The former performs 95% of his role in Endgame through facial capture technology, with Bruce Banner marrying his own personality to the physicality of the Hulk, and it is tremendous. Ruffalo deserves so much praise for the work he's done on the character, especially so given he hasn't had a single solo film to his name, and in giving him a different platform to take the performance somewhere new, Endgame deserves just as much. Rudd, meanwhile, is the heart and soul of the fourth Avengers film. He looks up to Captain America with gleeful abandon, and is the one to galvanize Earth's mightiest heroes into action. Sure, it's easy enough to sing the praises of Paul Rudd, a man who, realistically, has no flaws to speak of, but it's fair to say that this was his film where he made Ant-Man his own. Although Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse didn't pioneer the concept of embracing comic books with unrelenting enthusiasm, it did manage to perfect it. Sony Animation's Oscar-winning film is a classic in the making, boundless in its vision and breathtaking in its execution. It thrives by writing a love letter both to comics and animation, and due to being an animated film, there's pretty much nowhere that it can't go. Live action, on the other hand, is a different story. There are limits, both budgetary and otherwise, that restrict comic book movies in particular from going that extra mile. Endgame somehow manages to have none of those concerns, and while it can't quite match the scope of Spider-Verse, it is epic in the truest sense. Whether it's by replicating the connection between Marvel and its readers for the big screen, or in delivering on some of the most brilliant and yet oh so bonkers concepts from the comics themselves, Endgame is a pure and unabashed celebration of Marvel, superheroes, and the comic book medium. The film is a living testament to the creativity Marvel's books exhibit, and have exhibited pretty much since the 1940s. The legacies of dozens of different creatives can be found in the film, and though this aspect is certainly diminished by the fact many of those figures will never see the kind of success those involved in the films have in replicating those most captivating elements of the Marvel mythos, Endgame is a cut above the rest. Ultimately, however, there's another reason why Endgame stands out as the finest comic book movie, and it's all to do with the reaffirming energy it exudes in its concluding act. Endgame had to be everything Infinity War wasn't. Not in the sense that it had to be less expansive or ambitious, the film doubles down in that latter respect, but more in the sense that it couldn't be as somber. There had to be pathos, and the film possesses plenty of it, but still had to remind everyone that comics are just as fantastical and enjoyable as they are occasionally devastating. Coming out of Endgame, the feeling wasn't so much a sense of exhaustion, as was the case with Infinity War, but rather renewal. Several heroes may have passed, but they did so on their own terms and in a way that managed to reiterate the unique brilliance of Marvel's cinematic universe. It manages to break everyone's hearts and piece them back together in one motion, reminding us all that, while heroes come and go, this isn't the end, but a new beginning instead. In the end, watching the most recent Avengers film isn't all that dissimilar to diving headfirst into the umpteenth chapter of a years-long comic book run. It isn't perfect, and it might even be messy at times, but when it all comes together, nothing can come as close. And that was why Avengers Endgame is the greatest comic book movie ever made. Agree? Disagree? Let me know down in the comments below, like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want more, and head back on over to whatculture.com where you can find more of this sort of thing every day. I've been Ewan, you can catch me on Twitter @EwanRunesThings, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!